All right. Hello, everybody. We're going to have today the discussion session on chapter 7 on documentation, supporting documentation for tests. I will share my screen and share slides. Okay. So for today, I was hoping to have some time for doing updates, then do some check-in, and then have group discussion and plenary, like extended versions. We have a lot of time actually, and the chapter is kind of short, so yeah, we have plenty of time. And actually, if you feel that maybe we are taking too long, we can just end earlier. That can happen too. And at the end, write questions to the expert that for the chapter is going to be Stephen Sears. So yeah, well, I mean, in terms of updates, I am planning to do I am planning to schedule some time for the study group in specific. There's going to be like a reception as the JSIC, but also I am planning to have some time and place in the conference for the group. But however, it's going to be maybe Sunday afternoon, which might not be the best time because people may be leaving. But yeah, I was trying to look for another time and it was super complicated. It's everything with something. The other option would be to do something early in the morning. I'm not sure if people are going to be available for that. What do you think? In terms of the time, do you have a preference?
I'm leaving in the afternoon.
Okay.
Yeah, I am too.
Okay. So Sunday afternoon would be a bad day, maybe. Yeah, I will try to look for an alternative in that case. And if like something very early in the morning, is that an option or not?
We could do that. I think we're gonna see each other no matter which like social networking event we go to.
Yeah,
Maybe we can use some of those events to just like get together as a group briefly.
yeah, that's true too. We can see. Okay, yeah, I will have that idea in mind too, to look for times. All right, so check-in. We can spend 5 minutes, I think. And the question for check-in today is if you have read any technical documentation of a test, if you have tried to do that, and in what context have you needed to read documentation? So we are not that many. We can just have this group. I mean, we are 4 now connected. So I don't think we should do like breakout rooms or anything. What do you think? Okay, let's do this. So how are you today, please?
It's good. It's okay. How are you guys?
Hang in there. It's all right.
Okay.
Yeah, I was mentioning at the beginning, I was scared with the Ukraine war. And I was asking if anybody was related to that in some way. Like,
Yeah, that's terrible news. It's good to acknowledge actually. I know people in Turkey are kind of like getting overwhelmed with the situation because people are fleeing the eastern Ukraine and they're going to other countries, of course. Some of them are gonna overflow. And Turkey is one of those countries, and we already have a lot of refugees from Syria and Afghanistan currently. So there's like a lot of both political and economical and human related issues going on.
yeah, it's true. Turkey receiving everybody. And also it's super close to the conflict itself, so yeah.
As if we are not populated enough.
And Ukraine it has a lot of people. I think it has like 40 million or something. It's a lot of people.
It's a big country too. I mean, it's like surface land is big too.
Yeah.
It's just sad.
It's have you ever needed to read any technical documentation of a test?
I did see one. I didn't like completely read it, but I overviewed one at the AICPA, actually, the Public Accounting Exam Making Bureau. So they were just showing like how everything was structured, how they're documenting every decisions and why, with justifications too. It was a very automated document though. It was like a markdown. You just changed the data and statistics for that data set for that year. And if everything, including the fairness issues and everything, is still in place. Yeah, that was interesting how detailed it was.
How about the rest? Maggie, Stephanie, have you
Yeah,
needed a technical
I
document?
tried to go through some before in my, so I teach in this ESL program, and there's like a placement / pre-test post-test students take, and I'm really interested in it because there's like overall negative perception of this test with the people who teach there. And it's somewhat interesting to me because it's an adult education program, but it's teaching ESL, or testing English, I should say. So those seem to be two different perspectives. So I've been trying to understand the test a little better and going through some of the documentation. But for me, like navigating the website and then reading things is kind of difficult sometimes because everything's very technical. It's interesting though.
Yes. How about you, Maggie?
Yeah, so I've done a lot of research with English language learners, actually, same as Stephanie. And some of the research we did to collect data was to use two standardized tests, which are the NICETEL and NICESLAT for measuring English ability. And so I've looked through their technical manuals, what was available online, and then my own dissertation work is around standardized mathematics items. So wherever available, and not every state publishes their technical manuals, or if they do, it's like an abbreviated version or one that just kind of like skims over a lot. So where possible, I've looked at a few different versions of different states' assessments, but they're a bit sparse.
But that's great. I mean, you have seen like the difficulties. You have seen like the limitations that may be there. That's cool. I remember a long time ago, before coming here to UMass, I read the technical manual of the one test that is done here at UMass. It's called the Massachusetts Adult Proficiency Test. And Steve Sireshi, that is going to be the expert invited. I can see why he wanted to come for this chapter in particular, because that the documentation of that test, it's very well done. And I think it's kind of like you may say it's like an example of how you can do the documentation in a way that is very complete. In particular with the validity argument of the test. That's included very clear.
What is it called?
MAPA, sorry, Massachusetts Adult Proficiency Test. MAPT. Yeah, that document, before even knowing or like knowing if I wanted to come here to UMass, I read that document, and it was like a great example of the type of studies and how to structure like a validity argument and so on. It's nice. And I try to see like technical documentation of other tests that I am interested, but most of the time I don't find something that I would call like a technical manual or a documentation. Sometimes it's more like sparse studies, but nothing like it's like curated, if you want, like not like a document that really like takes all the sources of evidence and tells you like a story about like what's going on. Yeah, but maybe I haven't explored that many tests. because yeah, I don't think I've done something similar to what you did, Miley, for example, that like checking on Menino. Alrighty. So, well, I mean, we can have the discussion now. I mean, we are not that many, so we are the group. So, what do you think about the chapter? Give me one second. I'm going to look for the link to the vision board.
Given how detailed these documentations are in the companies or organizations, it was such a brief chapter.
It is very brief, yeah. Actually, I think at some point I felt that maybe I should have merged chapter 6 and chapter 7 because each of them are very short. However, still I think they deserve a discussion on their own, but yeah. Somebody wants to write notes?
Sure, I can.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. So what else? Any other opinions or thoughts for the chapter? No? Everything's perfect? We should keep it as it is. Okay, good.
I mean, every exam is so different. They can't really go too much into detail in this chapter. I understand that piece, but maybe they should expand a little more on like what are some pieces that should be included, you know, like remember we talked when we had Alina Wandevier for a discussion that we could have a template to put such information in. You know, like in terms of documenting the decisions and everything we do, like it would be good to have a template to just like as a checklist or something. And also these technical documentation, some of them are public, some of them are not, because some of them are serving the advisory committee board meetings, right? So they might be different for different contexts and different discussions. That's why I think highlighting those parts that should be included in, like, no matter where you share it is important, like in a template or whatever.
Anybody else? No? The thing about the audience or the people to which a document is directed, I think is very important. And I think you are right in that there are many different audiences. And I think that the chapter at some point mentioned that you need to adapt to the correspondent audience. but maybe it's not exploring all the possible audiences. So you may need a documentation for public. You may need a documentation for experts. You may need a documentation for the test, the person that is mandating the test. Who else? I don't know. Eventually, if you want to be more participatory, you may want to split the public and don't consider that just everybody, but direct to specific stakeholders like teachers, students. I don't know, like in K-12, maybe you need to target like schools and people inside school. That part might be more complicated to like explicit, but definitely maybe at least consider the possibility that there is a public and that there is a community of experts and that there is a mandant. Yeah, maybe those three are kind of like more typical if you want. Yeah.
I agree. And I just remembered that I think a couple months ago, my supervisor at the testing center at UW-Madison Placement Testing Center, she had me overview some of the aspects about when you're writing items, questions, what you need to be sensitive in terms of the diversity inclusion aspects and all, because they have been changing a lot during the time. And she updated that piece of the technical, the documentation of the exam for mostly the item developer committee, like telling them how like they should be careful about some, because terms are changing, concepts are changing, so they should be sensitive to those. So maybe it could, in terms of updating it, keeping up with the like current concepts that are evolving around the DEI issues might be something to mention, maybe.
Well, that's true, that sometimes the documentation can serve as a communication tool within a team. So actually within a test agency, you may need to have also documents to explain things among themselves. So for test developers or for like other parts of the production chain, if you want. very like 4D and like a car. But but it's true. Sometimes the companies may have like subgroups within, so documentation might be also necessary for those type of communications. Yeah. Some other comments, opinion?
I think the way we have it right now, like building on what you said earlier, Sergio, like a lot of the public facing documentation, especially for parents, students, and teachers, is very lacking. Like it's kind of funny, like my uncle and aunt both have PhDs, they're in geology, but like they're very smart, capable people, and they got their child's New York State state test results back, and they were very confused about how to even interpret it or what to do with it. And it's like, they're very capable, smart, people. And it's like, I can't even imagine how, parents for whom English is not their first language, or who have really no understanding of what the test means or what it does, how they would interpret it, because, if it's hard to access for, a fairly educated person, I can't imagine how it would be for, a mainstream person. So just making some of those clear. I think even just for teachers, like having been teacher and getting those results, it's like we really weren't clear on like what it really meant, and weren't giving any real support about that. So I think just kind of including some of those things, and maybe some clearer guidelines about how to disseminate these findings would be good too.
Yeah, definitely. It shouldn't be like, maybe it should be technical for the technical audience, like the advisor boards and all, but maybe that spectrum of technicality should be really reduced to communicate it to the public. I think that speaks back to like different audience has different levels of understanding the process of like the test creation and use and score interpretation. So maybe it should be adjusted. It's not necessarily a very technical document. Of course, it's nature-wise, it's going to be a little technical, but yeah.
In my own research and the papers that I've been writing, I've been I've been exploring a lot the literature about how to make validation participatory. And there is one very interesting concept that is called rhetorical argumentation. And it's like a view in the field of what is called informal logics. Informal logic is kind of this idea of how do you construct an argument to defend something scientific. That is very similar to the Keynes argument-based approach. All the kind of philosophical framework in which Keynes made his approach is based on informal logic. And this idea of the rhetorical argumentation is to create an argument, but not an argument that is correct, but also an argument that is well explained. And kind of doing like an upgrade in all that world of informal logic, so you can start to build arguments that are not just correct, but also take more consideration about the rhetorical aspect. Rhetorical means how exactly do you present the argument so it can be better understood. And it's fascinating. And actually, when I read this chapter, when I started to speak about the audiences and the documentation, that's actually very rhetorical. That you need to need to adapt to the specific communities or specific stakeholders, and that's for me it's fascinating that world. I mean, you can explain even among experts. Sometimes we are not that clear what's the best way to explain an argument, a validity argument. But what are the better ways to explain the validity to someone else? And kind of coming back to this idea that if you cannot explain something to your grandma, maybe you don't understand really much what you are saying. And I think that can be true. I mean, if you cannot explain why a test is valid for a parent, then maybe there's something wrong. I mean, we should be able to explain in a very like clear, succinct way why some test is valid. And yeah, I am fascinated with it. I mean, I'm doing my dissertation very not exactly on that, but very affected by that mindset. Yeah.
I'm kind of interested from like the testing companies or the vendor, like their perspective, because I've been going to like a few updates about this new test development they're doing, and they're trying to recruit participants for field testing. And they're offering incentives like gift cards, but sometimes I wonder if they could also kind of incentivize teachers to participate if they're talking about, you know, the validity or the fairness, because I think teachers very much care about that, but they don't mention it at all. And I feel like I just wonder if that's something they could consider doing to kind of help disseminate this information about their test and what they are doing. I mean, I guess that's a little different than documentation, but I mean, I feel like it could potentially be helpful for the relations between the two.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I suspect that exactly that dialogue that can happen between a test company and different groups, teachers or whatever, that should have an impact. I mean, it's not for free that if you don't speak, then that can create like expectations that are incorrect or myths about the test. And that should, my theory, and this is like a very, I don't know, like long shot, I don't have any evidence about this, is that you should be able to see those in the experiences of the examinees. The examinee will be affected by this either dialogue or no dialogue or misdialogue. And but yeah, I mean, there's still a lot of research on that, maybe to show the problem. And yeah, and I think teachers, at least a few examples in which I can imagine, they definitely will be motivated to at least have a document for them or to participate and respond or include themselves or something like that. Yeah. All right, any other last comment? No? I wanted to add one last comment that I found interesting, the idea that let me look for the paragraph. The idea that documentation should be timely, that you should have the documentation at the right time. But when is that right time? That maybe I found that interesting, that I was like even mentioned in the standards. Let me look for the. Yeah, I mean the first standard, the standard 7.0, information related to tests should be clearly documented so that those who use tests can make informed decisions regarding which test to use for a specific purpose, how to administer the chosen test, and how to interpret the test scores. So that means that you need to have documentation after you use the test. And the other, yeah, the other is at the beginning, regardless of who develops the test or how many users exist, the development process should include throughout timely and useful documentation. Timely. But then it says that you can use the test before having the documentation, which for me is super weird. And it's like a typical, it's a common practice, but I'm not sure if I agree with that. Because if you are going to have either a timely documentation or have an informed decision, how you can take that if you don't have a documentation? You should have that beforehand. But also all the studies about consequences and things like that, sometimes they require this to have been done. So how can you like include that type of evidence in those documents? So I think there is like an interesting thing there with the timing of the documentation.
I think maybe when they say timely, like maybe you not to lose any details about decision-making process from scratch when you first started, when you first reached out to experts to just construct that test, who said yes, you know, who's joining, what are their backgrounds, what kind of things they need to focus on when they are writing items, or after writing items, how are we gonna create the rubric, how is the rubric gonna be used, and all. Like you should be doing this as you're developing them before the test and documenting already.
I see.
And the documentation should be disseminated upon the test is over, you know what the use is, and the test is done. Now you can share the documentation because you did everything that you were already documenting, and it's all done now to be presented to the boards for a review.
That's true. Okay, yeah. All right. Well, I mean, I don't think that we need to have a plenary time now if we're just one group, because we just have the discussion. So maybe we can write questions to Steve. Maybe that can be, and if we can like also put likes right away, that would be great. If we can like write questions and put likes to him. Okay, I think we are going to keep writing, but I think I can finish the recording. So I will stop the recording now.